We won't do that. You don't want to eat the king's meat. It's unclean. But the sad thing is, was there only 4 people, young people, that were captives? But only 4, a minority, only 4 stood up and said, no, we've got to do what's right. And they were willing to die because, 3 of them was going to get into a furnace, right? And one of them would not renege on his prayer life. And they threw him in a lion's den, but God protected him. So this was an actual promise that you are going to go into captivity. And he also specified who was going to do it. Assyria was going to do it. And so first of all, he calls it Egypt, because that's just a general thing, the character, and then he specifically says the nation, Assyria, would do it. Verse 4, they shall not offer wine offerings to the Lord, neither shall they be pleasing unto him. Their sacrifices shall be unto them as the bread of mourners. All that eat thereof shall be polluted, for their bread, for their soul shall not come into the house of the Lord. And basically what he's going to say is legitimate opportunities to worship in a proper way is going to be dissolved. You won't have that anymore. You turn your back on it. And so all of these, you remember, this whole section is on the festivals. So you had the drink offerings and the other sacrifices. God's saying these are all unacceptable. And he said the reason why they're unacceptable is because you are unclean. As a nation, individuals, you are unclean. And because it says, it talked about one of the things in the Levitical law is that if you came in contact with something dead, then you were defiled and polluted. And so God is looking at them as if they've come in contact with a dead religion, dead situations. And so he says, therefore, you're unclean. And that's what he's saying here. And verse 5, what will ye do in the solemn day and in the day of the feast of the Lord? Basically what he's saying is, as these annual feasts would come around, he said, you're not going to have anything at all to offer me, because they are captives or slaves in another country. And he's also saying it's just as well, because even if you had something, I wouldn't accept them. They're not the right offering, and that's what he's saying here. These offerings would be unacceptable in their exile. Verse 6, for lo, they are gone because of destruction. Egypt shall gather them up, Memphis shall bury them, the pleasant places for their silver. Netless or nettles shall possess them, thorns shall be in their tabernacles. And so because of their destruction, they had to leave the land, and the city of Memphis, this is a city near Cairo. And the reason why he mentions this is because this Memphis was an Egyptian city that was famous as the burial sites, because that's where all the tombs, the pyramids. And so he says, back in your land, the promised land, guess what? It's going to be full of weeds. It's not going to be a pleasure. because you abandoned your treasure. And so the thorns are going to overtake your house. And he's just saying where you're going is like going to a funeral home, a mortician, as if you were dead. And so that's what he's talking about here. Now, another problem that they had, and letter B here in verses 7 through 9, the cause, opposition to the prophets. In this case, this was Hosea was a prophet. He was a mouthpiece of God, giving them God's message. And as you can know from history, they didn't listen to his message. Verse 7, the days of visitation are come. The days of recompense are come. Israel shall know it. The prophet is a fool. The spiritual man is mad, for the multitude of thine iniquities and the great hatred. That's almost today. You speak the truth, and this is what people do. I don't want to hear the truth. And so what he's saying is your punishment, one of the things he's saying here is that you're imminent, the visitations are come. In other words, they're going to be coming very soon. He said, I've prophesied this, but God is telling me your punishment is going to come very soon. And it did, just a matter of a few years. And then the Assyrians came. And but that's one thing. But the major thing he's talking about here is that you called your prophets fools and people who were spiritual. You called them mad. And I'm sure it's kind of like Noah preached righteousness. And I'm sure the little kids came around, probably threw rocks at him and said, where's the rain, Noah? I haven't watched the rain. Why are you building an ark? You're mad. And so that's what he's talking about here. And the great hatred. And that is true. Men despise righteousness. Why? Because we have a sinful nature. And they don't want to admit it. And what the prophets, what they did, you remember, they were representing Yahweh, and just like Hosea, and they were giving Yahweh's or God's message to them. And but he said, you rejected their message, and we read like Jeremiah, what they do, told him the truth, threw him in jail, and down a pit. So, verse 8, the watchman of Ephraim was with my God, but the prophet is a snare of a fowler in all his ways, and hatred in the house of his God. In other words, a watchman is supposed to be watching and warning the people, right, of things that's going on. And a watchman would be like one of those spiritual men, or the prophets. They were watching and crying out, there's danger coming, it's coming, repent. And but he said the prophet is a what? A snare of a fowler. In other words, one of the ways they caught birds or fish, you take a net and you throw it out, and it captures the birds. In fact, I was having a pool party at my house this afternoon. This morning I went out in our bird bath and I filled it up with clean water, and there had to be maybe 15, 20 birds. They were all sitting on the fence just waiting to get in there, the fowls. So if I had a net, I could have caught about 15 or 20 birds real easy. But they're snares. And it says there was hatred in the house of his God. Notice that word hatred. I mean, it's sad that that's what they did. And so all they did was they saw nothing profitable with these prophets. They didn't want to hear the message and from them. And then verse 9, and they have deeply corrupted themselves as in the days of Gibeah. Therefore he will remember their iniquity, he will visit their sins. And then he speaks of this city again in chapter 10, I think, Gibeah. Anybody remember what took place in Gibeah? Because I sure didn't, so I looked it up. It's Judges, chapter 19, 20, and 21. I still didn't remember. They told me the chapters. So I had to go back and read it. And what it was, you had a Levite who had a concubine. She went a-whoring, but he went to get her and bring her back. And his servant said, well, let's go to this city for the night, because they didn't have Motel 6s. And so what you did is you just went to the town square, as it were. They would realize you were a stranger, and somebody would come and say, you can house with me. Well, the Levite said, no, I want to go to Gibeah or another, because that's in Benjamin, in the tribe of Benjamin. And so he wanted to be with them. So he goes there, and it's like Sodom and Gomorrah. When the angels came, they wanted to molest the angels. Well, that's what they wanted to do here. They wanted to molest him. And so they took the concubine, had an affair with her, and actually they killed her. And if you remember, he cut her up in 12 pieces and sent it to the different tribes. And so they had over 400,000 soldiers, Israel did. And they came, now this is in Judges, they didn't have a king or anything, so they all came down. Now they did do it right in that they said, give us the people in Gibeah that did this. But the Benjamites said no. I mean, that was their sin, and they had like 28,000 men. They had 400,000. So Israel goes in, and they inquire of the God, said, well, okay, who should go first? Who should be our general? And they said, Judah. And so they go in, and they go in to fight them, and 22,000 Israelites get killed. So they go back to God, and they're weeping and sorrowing, and they said, okay, should we still go in a second time? And he said, yes. And this time they lost 18,000. And if you kind of remember Joshua, you know, they go in, and they win there at Jericho, but you notice when he went to Ai, if you read in that, Joshua did not really pray about that battle. He just said, oh, we don't need all of these people. We can just go and do it in our own strength. And that's kind of what God was doing here. And look at, I'll read it, but I'm in Judges chapter 20. And I'm going to read starting at verses 26. Then all the children of Israel and all the people went up and came unto the house of God and wept, and sat there before the Lord, and fasted that day until even, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And the children of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before in those days, saying, shall I yet again go to the battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother, or shall I cease? And the Lord said, go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into thine hand. Now, if you read, I had to do a little reading on this. The reason why God gave him the defeats the 2 times is because they were going in their own strength. They pretended like they acquired of the Lord, but the 3rd time they humbled themselves. Then men, women, children, everybody was praying and fasting, and they humbled themselves, and God says, okay, now you're asking in the right way, so I am going to give you victory tomorrow. And so they did that. Now here's the interesting thing, is this portrays to Israel. And this is verses 34 and 35, and this is talking about Benjamin, and this was their downfall, and this was going to be the downfall of Israel. Verse 34, and there came against Gibeah 10,000 chosen men out of all Israel, and the battle was sore. Now this is the phrase, but they knew not that evil was near them. And the Lord spoke Benjamin before Israel, and the children of Israel destroyed of Benjamin that day 25,100 men, all these that drew the sword. And if you know, they wiped out every Benjamite except for 600 men. Everyone, men, women, children, everything. But the point is, they didn't know that the evil was very near. And the same thing for Israel. That's what the prophet was trying to say. Israel, your end, the evil is very near. But they ignored it. They would not listen to the prophet. So, all right, we ran out of time. Couple letters here.